Okay, in this video we're going to develop an application that is a multi-monitor screenshot. In other words, it will take a screenshot of multiple monitors. In my case, I've got 3 monitors that are each 1920 by 1080 dimensions. And it will take screenshots of each of those and put them in separate picture boxes. Okay, and we're going to get into some other stuff we're going to discuss, but that's the main goal of this application. So let me start up the application to show you what it does. So I've got a Windows Form application and I've got 3 picture boxes. I basically made one picture box and copied and pasted to the other 2. And I've got 3 buttons. One is a capture button, one is a screen info button, and one is an exit button. And here I've got a list box. Now let me show you what this does. Again, I've got 3 monitors on my computer, and when I hit capture, it displays those 3 monitors, the screenshots. Okay, underneath it's got some text in some labels that tells me the name of the display, the system name of that display, and in this case I've got some slashes, a period, a slash, and display 1. So this is my primary display, and it also tells me it's primary. And then I've got display 4 over here and display 2. So these are screenshots of my 3 monitors. And here I've got screen info, and I'll press that button and it will fill a list box with data around each of the displays. So here's my display 1, which is this guy, and here's the device name, which is down here. It also has the bounds, the coordinates, and the width and height of the display. And here it says X0, Y0, which is the upper left corner coordinates of that display. So it's 0, 0 is this coordinate right here. And it says that display has a width of 1920 across the top and 1080 the height. Okay. So it also has an indication, a Boolean, is it a primary screen? And here it says true. So that tells me this display is a primary screen. And then the next one, display 4, same thing. The coordinates of the upper left-hand corner are 1920 and 0. Now, if you recall, this one is the coordinates are 0, 0. And this is 1920 wide, so it makes sense that the coordinates of this corner are 1920 and 0. Okay, so X is 1920, which is 0, 0, goes over to 1920 and 0. And then the width and height of this display are the same, 1920 by 1080. So 1920 over, 1080 down. And then the third display is display 2, and the upper left-hand corner, if you look at it, well, wait a minute, this says minus 1920 and y equals 0. So that's telling me that this upper left-hand corner is way over here at minus 1920. Since this is 0, 0 and this is plus 1920, then this display is actually over here at minus 1920 and 0. And that's correct, because the physical layout of my monitors is this is in the middle. This is a primary display in the middle. This one's on the right-hand side, and this display too is actually over on the left-hand side. So this box displays info on these screens. Now, a screen in .NET is actually a class, and the screen class basically contains data about the displays. It doesn't contain any bitmaps or images or anything else, just data about each display. And there's a bunch more data you can get out of it. But this is just a sample of some of the stuff you can get. But really, it's just data about the display. So that's the screen class in .NET. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, one more thing I want to point out. You can see here the system name, the device name of each display has // period /. And that's kind of annoying. So in our code, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to do some regular expressions, or regex, to get rid of that, that annoyance there. But that's basically the application. Now let's jump into it and see how we did it. This is basically the code. And here I'm using one of my favorite aspects of Visual Studio, which is the region. And all that means is I can take an area of code or comments and define it by a # region and a # region. And what that does is that adds a way to hide it or display it. So it basically gives you a plus minus that you can open up and close just to make it easier to read your code. So we'll go through here. We've got the basically initialized component of the form. That's the standard Windows form. Here we have button 1. And if we go back to our display, I said I've got 3 buttons. Button 1 is the capture. You can see over here button 1. Button 2 is it asks for the data associated with that screen, so that's button 2, and button 3 is the exit. So button 1 is when you capture the screen captures. So button 1, when I ask to capture the 3 displays, all I've got in here is a call to a method that I have made down here, which is called capture screen, and it basically just jumps down into this area of code. And this is the code that actually does all the work here. Capture screen will go through and it will capture each screen in the on the computer. Now, how does it do that? Well, first I want to introduce something that's called and I mentioned before, the screen. And remember over here, we gave the info that is located in the screen class. But a screen in .NET is just a class. And that class, again, contains data about each of your monitors, each of your displays. And we saw that before. We did screen info and it's got this data. Again, it's not an image, it's not a bitmap, it's nothing to do with the actual contents of the screen. It's just data surrounding each of the screens. So there is a property of this screen class called AllScreens, and it basically contains an array or arrays of this data. So if we go here, this is basically the contents of all screens. It's basically an array of all this data, groups of data for each of the displays. Okay, so we are stepping through, we're doing a for each to step through each screen in that array, the array of all screens. So we're going first to display 1, then to display 4, then to display 2. Okay, so this just steps through each screen in the array of all the screens connected to the computer. And as we do that, each time we will grab a screenshot from the display, the present display, and then we will display that screenshot in the picture box. Okay, we showed these picture box. Now, let's expand that to show how we first grab the screenshots from each display. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a bitmap. And we talked about bitmaps in our previous video on image processing and Lockbit, so you can look at that if you want more information. But we're instantiating a new bitmap, and we're naming it screenshot. Okay, so all this line does is it makes a new bitmap and calls it screenshot. The parameters of that bitmap are defined by the width and height of the present screen. So the first time we go through, it's going to be this display 1, and it's going to take, here it's going to take the bounds and width of that screen, and it's going to take the height of that screen. And we said it's going to be 1920. This is going to return 1920, and this will be 1080 for our first display. And in fact, for each display, it's going to give the same number. So we're making a bitmap that is 1920 wide by 1080 high, and we're also saying that it will be a 32-bit per pixel alpha RGB image or bitmap. Now, if you don't understand what that is, again, you can go back to our video talking about image processing and lock bits, and we go into detail about what does that mean. But basically you're saying, I'm making a new bitmap called Screenshot. It's 1920 by 1080, and it's 32 bits per pixel with alpha RGB. That's all this does. And each time I go through for each display, it's redoing this, making a new bitmap called Screenshot. Okay? So now I've defined a bitmap called Screenshot. Now what I'm going to do is take that Screenshot bitmap and copy from the display, actually copy from the screen and make a screenshot and store it in that Screenshot bitmap. And to do that, we've got 2 lines of code. And we are utilizing a graphics object, and we are using the method in that graphics object called FromImage. Okay, so we're making a new graphics object, and that's basically the standard graphics object in .NET, which is a drawing surface that you can draw lines, you can do a lot of drawing on it. And it also happens to have a method in there called copy from screen. So we are making a new graphics object called memory graphics, and we're making that based on this screenshot bitmap. So it's taking the parameters of the screenshot bitmap and making a new graphics object called memory graphics. Once we have that, we are using the method available to that graphics object called copy from screen. And these just define the parameters that the copy from screen will use to copy from the particular screen we're working on, the display, into the screenshot. And we have here in copy from screen, we first have the source X and Y, the destination X and Y, and then we are using the size. Again, remember we use the screen bounds up here to develop the screenshot bitmap. Screen bounds is just a dimension. Again, it's a 1920 by 1080. So we are using the screen bound size, which is those 2 numbers, 1920 by 1080. And we are using what's called a copy pixel operation. It tells the copy from screen to copy directly from the source, which is the display, into this screenshot bitmap. So these 2 lines basically copy pixel by pixel from the display into the screenshot bitmap. Okay, so at this point we have copied, as we go through for each display, we have copied from the display into the screenshot bitmap. And now we have a bitmap that we can display in each picture box. Now, here is some code that's kind of clunky and we can clean it up, but I wanted to do it this way just to show you the methodology we're using. Up here at the beginning of this capture screen method, I've got an integer I, and I've initialized it at 1. And I'm using a switch statement. So for the first screen, I will be equal to 1. So my display 1, I will be equal to 1. And therefore, I will use this case. And if I equals 1, then case 1, I will basically copy screenshot into picture box 1.image, which is this picture box right here. And you can see the property here is image over on the right here. So I'm basically just saying that the image in this picture box is going to be screenshot 1 that I just did a screen copy from the display. Now, this little bit of code is only to fill the label boxes under the display. Again, let's look at this. I do a capture and I've got these label.txt Okay, so I'm filling these labels in each underneath each picture box. So that's what this does. So if screen.primary is true, in other words, screen.primary is true or false, depending on whether that particular screen is the primary screen or not. So if this is true, that this particular screen we're working on, in this case display 1, if that is primary, then that label 1.txt under the image should be populated with the device name and primary. I've added primary to it. And device is basically, I've set up a string device up here, and it takes the device name from the screen class. Again, I said screen class is just a bunch of data about that display, and there's a device name property that I'm just grabbing that. Okay, so I'm saying device name is, in this case, fill it with display 1 and primary. So that's all that does right there. Now, when I'm done with that, it's done it for display 1. It breaks out of here, goes past these, and then it increments. So now I equals 2, and it goes back to the for each, and it does the next screen in the array of all screens. In this case, it's display 4, I recall, and it will just go through and grab the screenshot like it did last time. It makes a new screenshot bitmap, and it grabs the screen for display 4. And here I am taking the new device name and putting in device string. And now, since I equals 2, I go into the switch, I go to case 2, fill picture box 2 image with the new screenshot. And again, filling the labels underneath. If it's primary, it will give me the device name plus primary. If not, just the device name. And when it's done with that, it breaks, increments, I equals 3, and it goes through, grabs the next screenshot, and so on. So now the next thing we do is we have to put the information in this list box here. When we click the screen info, we're going to populate this list box with the data from the screen class for each of the displays. So what I do here is I will expand this, and we'll close this up. And here we are responding to the event handler for button 2, which is this button here, screen info. Okay, button 2. So what we do here is we do another for each exactly the same as the for each for grabbing the screenshot. It's this screen for each screen in the array of all screens. And here we go, for each screen in the array of all screens. We basically grab each property of the present screen, such as the device name, the screen bounds, which is those dimensions we showed, and whether it's primary or not. So for each screen, we're just going through, grabbing the screen properties and adding them to the items in the list box. Okay, so once again, we're just doing that, and we're filling out those based on that data. So that's basically what we've got. There's one more thing I wanted to mention. We said when we ran this, the device names have these slash and periods in front of them, and they're kind of annoying, and in here too. So we wanted to change in each of the list boxes under the displays, and also in the screen info, we want to try and get rid of those. So let me show you how we do that. First, in the when we're displaying the screenshots in each picture box, what we're doing is we're just taking the raw device name and storing it as the string called device. And that's what we're using to populate the labels. Another alternative to get rid of those is to use regular expressions. And that's basically a way to manipulate strings so that you can do exactly the kind of stuff we want to do. So what we're using is regex and a method called replace. Now, in order to do that, we need to make sure we are using system.text.regularExpressions. That will allow us to do that. And also, when we're doing this application, make sure you're using system.drawing.imaging, and system.windows.forms, and system.drawing. But for this, we need the regular expressions in order to do this. So I've made a modification so that we will replace the raw device name from the system, and we will use this replace method to make sure that the device name is replaced with one that only includes these values. And that just says we will have capital A through Z, lowercase a through Z, or the 0 to 9. And it will replace anything that's not that with a empty string. Okay, so this line basically removes all of the non-alphanumeric characters as defined in here. Okay, so we can also do that down here when we were doing the when we were adding to the screen data in that list box. And what I'll do is I will see I've got the exact same code, and I will just comment out the old one. Now if I run this, you can see I do a capture, and now it's got the clean display name. And if I do screen info, it's got the clean display names. So that's just a little info on how you can use regex to do some string manipulations. So that's it. That's basically the application. And one more thing that we'll probably talk about in one of the next videos. If you do a capture and you look at the memory usage, here's the process memory in Visual Studio. You can see it jumped up when I did the capture to 72 megabytes. And each time I do a capture, notice how it goes up by another 50 some megabytes. Now it's 124. Capture it again, 177. Capture again, 229. So each time I'm doing a capture, I'm using a lot more memory. So in one of the next videos, we'll talk about how to clean that up so that you dispose correctly of these bitmaps and all this graphics, so you don't keep using your memory. But that's basically the application on doing a multi-monitor screenshot. Hope it helps, and have a great day. Thanks.